Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the match preview. Newcastle welcome Nottingham Forest to St James's Park on Boxing Day. But before myself and John Gibson get into that, we are unfortunately going to have to look back on Newcastle's 1-0 defeat to Luton yesterday. It wasn't the performance nor the result we wanted, although it is the result and performance that I unfortunately predicted, although I would have gladly been proved wrong. John, it's fair to say that was arguably one of the worst performances we've seen under Eddie Howe.
I'm afraid it is. Given the opposition, etc., etc., we had said before the match at Kenilworth Road that Newcastle had to get 6 points out of 6 on the next two games because they were playing Luton and Nottingham Forest, two bang average sides, before the new year brings us Liverpool away, Man City at home, Aston Villa away. Now, there's three massive jumps in class and an FA Cup tie at Sunderland thrown into the mix there as well. And therefore, we needed points in the bag because we're already trailing behind the front runners in the league. Now, if we are going to finish in the top four to go back in the Champions League, and that has to be the target, then you win at Luton. You don't lose at Luton and finish in the top four unless it was an absolute freak result. And it wasn't a freak result in as much as we have suffered 7 defeats in our last 11 games in all competitions. That's not the Newcastle United we knew before. We've lost our last 4 away matches in the Premier League, won just one of the last 11, and have kept one clean sheet in 8 Premier League away games. That was the 8-0 at Sheffield United. Now that's alarm bells. You know, it's Christmas. It's supposed to be church bells. That's alarm bells. That is, for me, it was just confirmation that we are facing a desperate time. There was excuses able to be put forward before, unlucky, done by a last minute goal which was undeserved, etc., etc. But you know what? I'm getting fed up with repeatedly saying and meaning it that we're tired, we're exhausted, and we have an injury list that is in double figures. That is true. But you look at the sides Newcastle are starting with, the starting 11 on paper should be good enough to go down to Luton Town and win. Never mind the draw, and win, because that's what we do now. And or at least what we did do during 2023 until recently. And you know, I get worried when I hear Dan Burns say after the game Newcastle were outworked. I mean, that is not an accusation that it can be held against Newcastle very often, because the great thing is that the graft. And we had no intensity, we had no vibrance, we had no belief, and they were outworked. Now, isn't that awful? Because the one thing a side like Luton Town is going to bring to the table is a work ethic, because that gives them their biggest chance. They are inferior man for man, talent wise, so they bring a huge work effort. If we don't match that, we get results like we got yesterday. And unfortunately, and I don't want to be doom and gloom at Christmas time, but I'm getting a little fed up now. 7 defeats in 11. Unfortunately, this is a trend. If you get 7 defeats in 11, that's a trend. That's not unlucky just. It's a trend. And it's a trend that's got to be changed. It's poor, poor, poor. We were very, very average. And as you said at the top of the show, probably our worst display under Eddie Howe, or certainly since Eddie Howe got into his stride. Yes, we lost at home to Cambridge in the FA Cup just after he came, when Trippier and that played, but we were just beginning to form. Since we got in the stride, that's as bad as it gets.
Yeah, since Eddie Howe laid out his approach, that is probably the worst performance I think we've seen under his management. And you mentioned there Dan Burns' comments afterwards, and that's what really concerns me, John, is that even when you look at some of the results this season on the road, the result at Wolves when they should have held on and didn't, you can never doubt the commitment or the effort from the players. But against Luton, it wasn't there, and it wasn't there from the word go. And people are continuing to say it's down to fatigue because of the injuries, but that doesn't wash. Yes, they may be tired. I get it. I understand. But at the end of the day, you go on that pitch, and it doesn't matter how tired you are. You can still chase after a player. You can still attempt to match them in spirit and in fight. And within 5 minutes, Luton didn't even need to set the tone. Newcastle set the
No,
tone for them in the manner in which the first attack went down the right. Gordon couldn't track back, didn't track back, ball in the box, and that's the way it went for the rest of the afternoon. And it's not going to get any easier. And I think my biggest concern about Boxing Day, John, is how does Eddie Howe stop the away day blues creeping into the St James's Park dressing room?
well, the biggest hope he's got is the 50,000 people that turn up and still get behind the team because Newcastle win in the Premier League at home every single game bar one. And that's the biggest thing he's got for him. But believe you me, if we beat Nottingham Forest at home, problem's not solved. We beat Fulham at home in the last game, but then we've gone on to produce what we produce. And if we beat Nottingham Forest at home, our away form is so bad, and we are away to Liverpool, Aston Villa, and Sunderland in the FA Cup in 3 of our next 4 games. 3 of our next 4 games are on the road. So, it's at moments like this that Eddie Howe, Tyndall, Jones, and the rest earn their bucks. They got to
Indeed, yeah, 100%. And the past few away games discussed, John, we seem to always say it's fine margins. And again, Newcastle had a couple of openings against Luton. Probably the best one was the Callum Wilson header, and he's got to score really. And I think that kind of just sums up maybe the mood on the road. Even when you get these chances, which Wilson will score with his eyes closed at St James's Park, your luck's out. He doesn't score that one, and Luton obviously then go up to get the goal. But I mean, as much as we talk about injuries and fatigue, I'm also sick of saying Newcastle just didn't take the chances. On another day, they take the chance and it ends 3-0 Newcastle. I'm sick of saying that as well when we talk
Well,
about Newcastle on the
that's right.
road.
And we've got to remember that we were playing Luton. And with all respect to Luton, this is the first time we've played them in the Premier League era, not the old First Division, in the Premier League era. We've also got to remember that we lost 1-0 and they hit the bar twice. So you talk about them, we didn't take our chances, else we would have won. If those 2 shots on the bar had been 6 inches lower, we would have lost 3-0. So I think we deserve to lose on the day. If you were neutral watching the game, you would say the correct side won. Now that's awful. That's for Newcastle United. That's awful. And while talking before the kickoff, while the bench looked a lot better, there was Botman on it, there was Isaac on it, there was Kraft on it, Levemenko, Hall. It looked better. It looked stronger. The bench. The team was the same old, same old. Take the front three. I'm just giving examples, Andrew, and I'm not criticising them in particular. But you've got Miggy, who's having a nightmare. You've got Gordon, who's obviously far from fit and is not producing the all-action man shows that he had been producing. And you've got Wilson outside of his goal at Chelsea, not looking as if he's scoring and looking as if playing 4 games in a week and a bit is far too much for him, which I think it probably is. So there's your front three, which when they're on song have been very vibrant, are looking very, very average at the moment. And therefore, I mean, what can happen? But I would like to see the team shuffled for the starting 11. Shuffled for Nottingham Forest just to put some fresh faces in. We know what we're going to get from Miggy and unfortunately from Gordon at the moment because he's not what he is. We know what Wilson's going to produce. And so we go back in the team and we're just getting what we're expecting, what we're hoping against, but what we're expecting. And, that mold's got to be broken. And there's a few more available now, and not enough, but a few more. But really, I'm like you, and I think like a lot of Geordies, I still accept that injuries have played a massive part in this. I still accept that playing the same outfield 10 nearly every game means that they're mentally as well as physically exhausted, etc. But that's wearing thin with me now, Andrew. It's
Yeah,
wearing very thin.
it's obviously playing an impact. Obviously, if you had the options to change it, you would see a bit more energy about them. But again, I think it's an easy cop out really for what was an awful performance. And again, we know it's Christmas, and we are sorry for the mood that we're delivering. But the lack of fight against Luton it's really angered me, because you could count 5, 6, 7 examples when the Luton players were just able to stroll on through the Newcastle United midfield. Ross Barkley. Now, we spoke about Ross Barkley, John, in the Luton preview, and I told you I'd spoken to the Luton chap, and he had said, "Oh, he's the one to watch." I saw people on social media comparing it to a Ross Barkley testimonial. That was the level Newcastle put in.
Yeah.
Ross Barkley was just able to pull the strings, have a jolly good time of it. And there was one instance when the keeper kicks it out, he collects it midway inside his own half, and is able to stroll within 10 yards of Newcastle United's box, passes it to Adebayo, who forces a save from Dubravka. It's like Longstaff is running through cement. It's like Bruno is running through cement. Miley's nowhere to be seen. The defence, they're not running back. They're panicking. They don't know what to do. I mean, everything that Newcastle United are good at home, fight, spirit, effort, organisation, it wasn't there on Saturday. It hasn't been there fully on the road in a long time. And it is really, really concerning.
Well, it is when you think that you go to Liverpool and you go to Aston Villa, to your next 3 in the league. I mean, if we turn up with the display we had against Luton there, it's how many? I mean, Liverpool are our jinx side. They get results when they don't deserve them, like early this season at St James's Park. And Aston Villa will be a bit miffed about the 5-1 on the opening day of the season, won't they? And so we've got to pull ourselves together. We've got to do it quick. And excuses are out of the window. And Eddie, and his staff, that's why they get the big bucks. And I'm not having a go at Eddie, but this is where when you look at your manager and say, right, what's your plan B? What's your plan C? What are you going to do to pull the players physically out of this? Because it is very easy for that to sink into the home form. That's the worry. And this manager at Forest, who will think he was very badly done to on the opening day when they lost at home, his opening day, and they were, because the ball he's sending off was absolutely ludicrous. The second booking was absolutely ludicrous. And they had to play there with 10 men for 3/4 of the game. He'll be trying to get a bounce out of them up here. And if we produce anything like we produced against Luton, then we're in trouble up here. And that doesn't bear thinking about, because the 3 points up here with Forest have been seen as automatic and very much, because if you then look at our home form, the next home game is Man City. That ain't easy at our place. They've just won their 5th title with the World Club Championship, the 5th title in a calendar year. How about that? 5 cups in a calendar year.
Yeah. I mean, Forest is a really interesting opposition to face, and I've done a view from the opposition with Matt, who runs Forest Focus, and that'll be out on Christmas Day. A warning: the mood doesn't get any better, because he was down in the dumps about what happened against Bournemouth for Forest, and I was down in the dumps because it was recorded immediately after that game. But that will be out on Christmas Day. But he did say, while I was concerned about the lack of fight against Luton, he did say that Forest do not have fight. Even they showed spirit against Bournemouth, but he doesn't think they'll show too much fight or enough fight to get the better of Newcastle. So he was quite positive of a result in Newcastle's favour, which is quite interesting. But I just wonder, on the fight question, John, what are you putting it down to? Why wasn't it there on Saturday? Because it has been the foundation of Eddie Howe's side in Newcastle.
I think one of the big problems in football is, once you get on a slippery slope, 7 defeats in the last 11. Initially, when you've been a good side, initially you say, well, we were unlucky there. It was a late goal. We had 60, 80% possession, etc., etc. And you can justify a setback. But if that is not quickly turned round, it becomes an epidemic. It becomes into your psyche. You almost sort of go out there and think, well, you can't expect too much of us. We're shattered. We've got 11 unfit. The excuses are almost there before you start. In human nature, in players, as much as Eddie will say, oh, I don't want to talk about tiredness. I don't want to talk about injuries because I don't want to give players excuses. The point is you can't stop the players getting this into the head. It's a sign of weakness. It's not what you want, but it happens. And then people that you've relied on as hugely, whether that's Kieran Trippier, all of a sudden his form goes dip and he's looking at himself while instead of carrying half the back four in terms of organisation, etc., etc. And you very quickly can feel sorry for yourself and get into a run and you wake up. And I keep banging on about this 7 defeats in the last 11 because I don't hear Eddie Howe talking about it or any Newcastle player talking about it. But the facts of, or Newcastle fans don't wish to, and I understand that. But that is the facts of life. That is what we're in at the moment. And that's got to be turned. 7 defeats in 11. And with the 3 games coming in the new year, you've got to really make certain those numbers aren't bumped up further.
Yeah, it was a scary looking start to 2024. I think you can accept losing to Luton on the back of a mistake. Lewis Miley let his man run and they didn't deal with the corner and they switched off and the goals come. And it's disappointing. You'd be angry at that. You'd be saying we've worked on that all week at the training ground, but it is a momentary lapse in concentration. It happens. But again, I just look back at the lack of matching Luton man for man with the spirit, with the fight. And it just concerns me. It really, really does, because I can't get my head around it. When you watch back the highlights, when you look back at the analysis, match of the day essentially did their whole analysis on the lack of intensity from Newcastle United. It blows my mind. It blows my mind. And again, I know people will be listening and saying, well, they're tired. They're tired. What do you expect? But it wasn't like the level dropped slightly. It wasn't like it went from 100 to 80, which you can go, okay, fair enough. It was like it went from 100 to like 20 at best. And that's the big concern. Is it, John? Well, I'm going to say, is it an off day? But given their away form, it really can't be. What are you putting it down to?
No, it's not an off day. I think it's accumulation of things. And I think one of the most, and yes, it includes injuries, and yes, it includes playing the same outfield 10 all the time, puts pressure on them. But, you almost sleepwalk into situations like this. You can look and you don't win in Paris Saint-Germain because a penalty, there was never a penalty in the 98 minutes, so you can easily dismiss that. You come into a next game and we get caught at Chelsea in the 93rd minute. You can dismiss that. Players in the mind say, well, that's understandable. Well, that can happen. And then all of a sudden, you're almost mentally in a situation whereby the excuses come before the questions. And I think Newcastle are very, very close to that now, which is why, and I'm certain Eddie Howe will be doing it behind closed doors. You've got to sit them down and say, listen, never mind about all those injuries, those blokes out there. Never mind about how tired you are. Look around this room. Look how much talent's in this room, and you're producing from the kickoff. I mean, if they were vibrant, playing the way they play with a high intensity and a high press and all, and then run out of steam after an hour, you could understand it. But they came out at Luton as if, throw the ball to Luton, you play until you score. I mean, from the start against Luton, there was nothing Newcastle had going for them whatsoever. And that is what is worrying. We didn't start with a high intensity and do well and then blow up, which is a acceptable version of being tired. We just started mentally tired, which is why I don't know. I mean, when we play Forest, I don't want to see the same outfield. I know Lascelles has got an injury that will probably keep him out, but I don't want to see the same outfield faces all start again because I'll expect with the start the way we start. You're hoping that Isaac or Botman or Livrenko or even Kraft or will produce something. You're looking at the front three and saying, what can you do about that? At our height, our front three were dynamite. Our front three now of Almir and Wilson, who's still in the scoring charts because of his early season burst, and Gordon looked terrific on paper. There were nothing at Luton, and not for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, John, we've spoken about it before, about the lack of competition, how that's probably impacting the levels of performance as well. But I think we're going to have to move on from the Luton game, because I'm just going to get really angry, and I don't want to ruin my own Christmas by thinking about it too much. But there was a clip of a Luton player. I'm going to say turning Sean Longstaff, but that's been polite to Sean Longstaff. I mean, Sean may have as well not even been there, if I'm being honest, in that moment. This guy could have pulled on a bus onto the pitch, and Sean Longstaff would have got nowhere near it. What did you make, though, of the Lewis Smiley switch? Eddie Howe says it was tactical. He says he'll be fine. He'll understand. Will he be back in for Forest? Will it impact him, do you think?
Great question. Great question, because I would like to see changes for Forest. I've got a feeling Eddie thinks it's about time the lad had a rest, and not on performances, because he's defied these years and defied everything and produced great performances. But Newcastle, the pattern had been set from the kickoff. Newcastle was second best, and Eddie often, in terms of substitutions, certainly doesn't make them in the first half, and he's occasionally made them at half time, but he normally makes them in the second half. And often they're like for like, Gordon off a winger on, Wilson off Isaac centre forward, or whatever. He changes like for like. Here, surprisingly, he did it in the first half, and it wasn't like for like. It was to change the system so he could get Isaac playing as a 10 behind Wilson, to try to something different. It didn't work, but I can understand why he was doing it. Now, if you were going to make a change that early, you would look at your young lad, because he's just 17. He's the easy option to bring off. But also, there can be tiredness coming, and you can think privately he let somebody run off his shoulder on the goal. So it's not as if he was pulling up trees all over the park at that particular moment. I think the lad was unlucky, but it's the way it goes. And it's young guys that normally suffer with substitutions unless they're having a killer game, and quite frankly, nobody was, and he could have bought almost anybody off. There's no question about that. But the young lad is the young lad, and so he's vulnerable. It's what happens next, and I'm fascinated by what happens next. And I know team selection I'm talking about, and I know it's very limited what we can do, but I feel we've got to do something, because if the same 10 walk out against Forest, I'll be depressed before the thing kicks off, because I'll have a good idea how this might go. I'll get a bit more energy because we're at home with 50,000. But, I mean, just throwing the balls in the air, and I'm not meaning any of this is wonderful, but it's just to get some change. I would probably start with Isaac at centre forward instead of Wilson, who I think is rapidly playing far too many games on the bounce in terms of hamstrings and various other things, and hasn't looked dynamite, and did miss an absolute sitter with his head. I would probably play Isaac centre forward. I think you'd bring Lascelles, we feel will probably not play, but they'll never know with injuries. Botman, you would look to bring in. You can use Kraft either as a right back or a right-sided centre half, and he doesn't let the side down. Livramento might produce some, not just left back, but some sort of wing play in coming on and playing wide. And I would certainly prefer him to do that than Matt Ritchie, because Matt Ritchie ain't going to bring legs to a tired side. That's the first thing he's not going to do.
I think if it was me, I'd be playing Emil Kraft, Sven Botman, Dan Burn, and Tino Livramento across the back four. I think Fabian Schär needs to come out as well. He looked very shocked in the second half against Luton, but I don't think that'll happen. I don't think he'll make too many changes. I think he'll stick with Trippier. I think it'll be Schär, it'll be Botman, and I think it was Dan. No, Dan Burn. Dan Burnteen and Livermore is probably the only toss up, I think. But we know
He doesn't like changing his back four, does he?
he's very loyal, isn't he? So Dan Burn, I think you could see at left back, and then is it a question that maybe, like you say, Livermore maybe moves forward into a slot, and Gordon or Miggy drop out. But if it was me, so that back four there would be Kraft, Burn, Botman, Livramento. Then on the left, I would, potentially look at calling up someone like Amadou Diallo. Maybe can he push Alex Murphy forward a little bit? Because I just think obviously the quality and the experience isn't there. But then on the other hand, the legs and the energy, they're not there for Gordon. They're not there for Miggy. They need a rest, and something has to give eventually. And the options are you keep playing them and you keep getting them to run further and further into the ground without much success. I mean, you look at Gordon yesterday, 5 minutes on the clock. You could tell that he was not up for it at all. Physically, he's not up for it. The need to be out of the side, and even though you haven't got the like-for-like replacements you'd like, i.e., Harvey Barnes and Jacob Murphy, why not? Why not give a couple of the youngsters a chance? Because I tell you what, they can't do any worse than what the two did against Luton.
Oh, I mean, that is absolutely true. I'm getting slowly depressed here about Newcastle, and it's a festive.
I was already on that train. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to,
No,
but
and me, because I was angry. But I mean, what we face here on Boxing Day is a match between two sides out of form, because we've said we've lost 7 of our last 11, and I mean, Forest, with that defeat under the new manager, have now lost 6 of their last 7 and only won 1 of their last 14. So you've got, easy beats and dead beats. Forest are the easy beats, and the dead beats, dead on their feet, is Newcastle. So, there's something to look forward to on Boxing Day.
I think Forest's situation makes them a little bit unpredictable because he's only going to have been in the job a week. So he's hardly going to find his proper system. He's still going to be working to find his best starting 11. So I think a lot of people will look at this and say, well, Newcastle at home, they're fantastic at home. Only 1 defeat all season, 8 wins. This is a game for Newcastle which you expect to win because of what happens when Fulham came up. Everyone knows I was feeling really down about it. Newcastle thumped Fulham with the help of that 10 men. But I think there's a lot of expectation on Newcastle, despite their way form, to win this. But I think that makes Forest quite dangerous, actually, because they've got nothing to lose at all.
They're not good away either, Forest.
Yeah.
They normally get the points at home to stay up.
Well, John, funny enough, they've picked up the same amount of points on the road as Newcastle have.
Well, that shows how bad they are. That shows how bad they are. Because
and so
Newcastle, shocking.
Newcastle should win, but I'm even more wary of saying that this time around. Look, it's going to be interesting. I mean, the midfield three of Newcastle.
You're not worried about Chris Wood coming up here and scoring the winner for Forest, Andrew, are you?
Well, he's scoring recently.
Yes,
he's in a little bit of form, And look, they seem to be playing. I think the one thing you can probably bet your mortgage on is that they will play to Chris Wood's strengths, which is something Newcastle never did. And if you play to Chris Wood's strengths, you get that ball in the box, then there's a good chance he's going to score because he is very good at making crosses pace. And Newcastle need to be switched on if that is indeed the game plan. And they need to be better in midfield. They need to get control of the ball. They need to pass it better. It wasn't there against Luton. Again, it's got to be there against whatever midfield Forest put out. I mean, it was a kind of a 2-3 midfield for Forest before the red card. With Gibbs White on that kind of number 10 role, Yates and Malanga behind the 3 forwards with Wood up top by himself. The midfield battle is going to be key, John.
It is. What's interesting as well, Andrew, and I mean, I'm not suggesting this is the answer because there isn't a clear answer to the current situation apart from having some of the bodies that aren't available, like Willock and like Joe Linton? What would we give for Willock and Joe Linton to be fighting fit in time for Forest? I mean, that would be absolutely marvellous. Would the manager, who is not a gambler by nature, I think, but would he at all look at the midfield and say, I've got no options because of Willock and Joe Linton, no obvious options? So would you at all gamble with one of these three? Would you move Kraft in there to make it tighter? Would you move Hall in there to do what he did at Manchester United? Would you move Lafamenko in there to attack? Or do you go with your kids out of the academy? If you're going to change it at all, or do you just stick with your three with everything that's wrong with that three at the moment?
I think he sticks with a 3.
I think
do.
I think he will stick with the three. Yes.
Yeah, because he has no options. So you just have to hope that was what was lacking against Luton suddenly finds itself in time for Forest. And yeah, we just need them to be more switched on. We need them to be quicker to the ball, harder in the challenge, better with possession. We need them to be a lot of things. And as we mentioned, the games don't get any easier after this one. So this one is a really important one
Get
to
donned harder, Andrew. They
yeah.
don't either. They get donned harder because if you think, I don't mean you, if anybody thinks at Newcastle that Luton in Nottingham Forest, oh, they're tough, they're not easy matches, which is what every manager says, then what exactly Liverpool and Man City and Aston Villa is in comparison, goodness knows.
I mean, speaking to Matt, who runs Forest Focus, he says if Newcastle can manage to get some crosses into the box, which they did get quite a few in against Luton. We've mentioned that Callum Wilson chance. There was a couple of other teasing balls in the box, so more of that. He says Forest cannot handle it. You know, they're very disorganised at the back when teams pepper their box with crosses. So there's a little bit of positivity for Newcastle United. Of course, if it's Miggy, he has to turn on who's left and whip the ball in. So that'll be a helping hand to Forest. But hopefully Newcastle can get some crosses into the box, and whoever starts up front, I think it will be Isak, as you do, John, can get on the score sheet. I do think though, John, the early goal is going to be key. I think if Forest manage to get an early goal,
Well,
it could end 2 or 3 to Forest. And I can hear our listeners and viewers saying, goodness me, Andrew, you need to go and get some sunshine in your life. Newcastle United is the darkness at the moment. Because I do fear an early goal by Forest sets the tone.
well, it does if they get it, but they're not guaranteed to get it. An early goal to Newcastle will set the tone as well. And there's no question about that. If Newcastle get the early goal, you're saying if Forest get an early goal, it could go on to be 3-0. We could lose, and I follow your theory there. If Newcastle get the early goal, it could be 3-0, the same as it was against Fulham. But I would come away from that match relieved, but not convinced because I know what's waiting for us. You know, I cards on the table. I think we will beat Forest, but it doesn't change the overall situation in what's to come in 2024 at the start
Mm.
with 3 away games out of 4 if you include the FA Cup. And
Yeah,
it doesn't, whatever we do against Forest doesn't change that for me. Even if we play, we got 3-0 against Fulham. I know it was 10 men, but we got 3-0 against Fulham. It was comfortable. That didn't make us comfortable in the next couple of games we played, did it? You know,
no.
so I don't think that what happens against Forest will banish the Blues if we happen to win 3-0.
No, it doesn't kind of pit us over the cracks of the form
Yeah.
overall, I guess. I think the other frustrating thing about Luton was it was an excellent chance to put some distance between ourselves and the teams below, because obviously Man United had lost in the 12:30 kickoff. West Ham had won and gone above Newcastle, but if Newcastle had won, they would have put, I think, 2 or 3
Yeah.
points ahead of them, and it would have been a nice little gap going into Boxing Day. So a wasted opportunity there. But before I get your score prediction, John, I'm going to finish on a positive note because I accept this has not been full of Christmas cheer at all. But I'm going to say from February onwards, I think we will see Newcastle United finish the season at a canter. I think they will rocket up the table. They're going to have players back. They're going to have January editions. So I do think it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I think what we will see is Newcastle finish the season strongly. That's what I'm pinning my hopes on. That's my little bit of Christmas joy. A win against Forest helps that because you don't want to be too far below,
Sure.
the top four that you're chasing. That's the only positive that I'm coming out with at the moment.
Well, yeah, and I mean it's easy to follow that positive, and we've got to cling on to something because we don't want the season to disappear. Absolutely not. And it all depends on players getting fit. And I'm talking about Harvey Bonds, who we've virtually not seen. Willock, bless him, we haven't seen the heck of a long time. We need Joe Linton back. We need Murphy back. Pope ain't going to be seen for a long time. Um, but we need these people to come back. And we also need some shrewd business in the January transfer market. Always a difficult time because clubs don't want to sell quality and it might be on loan. But not only good business, Andrew, but early business. It's open for a month. Let's not sign two players in the final week if the transfer window. Wouldn't it be lovely to get somebody on January the 2nd with somebody else following on the 4th? That would be absolutely fabulous. And we've had time. We know when the transfer window opens, and, we've had time to set up deals to happen the minute the window's open. So if we get that, we need three things. We need a good January transfer window. We need the players back. And the third thing, which we've never mentioned or thought of, we need this trend of players going down as if they've been shot by a sniper. You won every game. Lascelles at Luton was the last one. That's got to stop as well. It's not about getting a load back of a load that's already in, like your Brunos or your Lascelles or Dubrovka or Almiron or Gordon. Then go out for 6 weeks. So that's the three things we need: is we need a good transfer window, we need the boys back, and we need this ridiculous amount of injuries we suffer per game to come to an end.
Yeah.
If that happens, we finish the season well. But it's how far we're behind
Yeah.
when that starts. Because how many points do we get out of Liverpool away, Man City home, Aston Villa away? Now we've got to get something out of those. You can make a case if you look at Luton to say that we're not going to get out, but because of away from home at Villa and Liverpool, but football thankfully isn't like that, and we might just come up with a performance and off we go.
I do feel the away form, it's going to take one result and then the ball will start rolling, but it's just where that result comes. And with Sunderland coming up away as well, it's a daunting little fixture that, and of course we'll cover that more in the first week
I,
of
I
the
would have,
new
I would
year.
have thought, I would have thought an 8-0 at Sheffield United might have set well, with the score being that big, but we've never seen another win since.
That's very true, John. That is very true. Are we going to see a win for Newcastle against Forest?
Yes, yes, I think we will, the same as we did against Fulham. But that doesn't mean it's a bed of roses from there on in, and we're going to sweep it into the new year and blow everybody away. But I think it'll be nervy. I think it'll be close. But I mean, the only reason I'm actually saying this, Andrews, the only reason you can actually give for believing it, and that's 50,000 Geordies. If we're at home, you wouldn't tip us to. If we're away, you wouldn't tip us to get anything at Forest, would you? But because we're home, I believe that something like 2-1, a very nervous, a very hard fought, but nonetheless a very welcome 3 points.
I'm going to go for a score draw.
Okay.
Don't think they'll lose, but I don't think they're going to win either.
1 point out of 6 wouldn't look great from the two fixtures we've just had, my friend, would it?
No, but it would look better than no points out of 6.
Yes, but we should be getting 6 out of 6 against that opposition.
We should.
Never mind, I think we'll win. You think we'll draw, so we don't think we'll lose. That's good.
That's it. And fingers crossed your prediction is right. All that remains to be done, John, is to get your Christmas message for our listeners and viewers.
Yeah, and I think after that, we all need a Christmas message. I think the biggest thing we can say is keep the faith. Yes, it has been a pretty poor end to 2023, 7 defeats and 11. But you know what? If we want to have a pot that's half full instead of half empty, it's been a wonderful year. In that year, we've finished fourth top in the Premier League. We've played Champions League football and produced one of the most memorable nights in Newcastle United's history when we beat Paris Saint-Germain 4-1. We've played in a Wembley Cup final, which is a rarity for us at the end of last season in the Carabao Cup. We've reached the League Cup quarter final this year, and we have beaten some very, very good sides at St James's Park. It has been a wonderful year. We perhaps overachieved in the year. You know, when Man City were first taken over by people from the same neck of the woods in the world, I think they finished about 15th or something the first time, and fifth the second season. They built slowly to what they are now, when they come here with 5 trophies in this calendar year. What is that sensational or what? But they built slowly. We went from nowhere to somewhere. We went from relegation to fourth, and therefore the expectancy levels go up. Whether it's called human nature, so perhaps we overachieved over quickly, but we've got to keep a sense of proportion. We've got to look back on 2023 and talk about top 4, Champions League, PSG 4-1, Wembley, all that in 1 year, compared with what we've had before. Yes, there's a dip at the end of it, but we're not as bad as we seem. And we've had a year like that. Let's carry that into the new year and improve on it. That's what Newcastle United are all about. We're still talking about looking up. We spent 15 years looking down.
Couldn't have said it better myself, John. To you guys listening and watching, thank you for joining us throughout the year. This may very well be the last match preview of 2023. We know there's a game against Liverpool, but thankfully I am off now until the 2nd. So John may rejoin you guys before that Liverpool game, but he also may not. So we'll say have a great new year now. Hope you have a wonderful Christmas. Fingers crossed next time I join you guys, Newcastle have picked up points against Forest and Liverpool and going to that game against Sunderland in high spirits. But we do appreciate you joining us. As always, it's been a fantastic year to cover Newcastle United, largely because of what John's just said there, reeling off all the great experiences, matches that we've been lucky enough to analyse, attend and what have you. And yeah, we just want to say thank you very much, as always, for your support. Enjoy the festivities and we'll catch you on the other side.
Merry Christmas. Keep the faith, guys.